All right, so typically I don't talk as much. I let you guys interact a lot more, but I just had so much information to give you. If I let you interact, I can't give you all the information I have. So please forgive me for that, okay? I know you guys have been sitting a lot, listening a lot. This hasn't been that interactive, and I know all that. I'm sorry. But I just want to make sure you have all this information. I may never see you again. So, all right. I like to talk about crisis response because you're in education. So, typically in my audience is this big. One or several of you may have been in a car accident. And that may or may not have been traumatic. And so I want you to just reflect on the idea of a car accident. And if it's been traumatic, don't reflect too much. Okay? For me, I was in a car accident, driving along, sideswiped, T-boned, car totaled, everybody was okay. But I didn't want to drive for a couple days. A couple weeks, really. If we're going to be honest. And I was really bummed out because my car had just gotten paid off. So that created a whole other set of stress. But anyway, so there we were, and the police were called, and the ambulance arrives, because that's what happens, right? And not really one time have I ever seen the paramedics arrive and say, "What the hell were you thinking? Why did you get in a car accident today?" True? If paramedics did that, what would happen? Escalate or de-escalate? Escalate. How many of us have been an emotional crisis responder and we've said, "What in the heck were you thinking?" Say it loud and proud. My point is what? We are emotional crisis responders. Whether we like it or not, we are responding to emotional crisis all the time. We have not had the training the paramedics have had. We need the training the paramedics have had. We need the opportunity to come up and say, "Looks like you're in crisis, how can I help?" Not, "What were you thinking? Are you kidding me? I can't believe you did that." How many times have we talked about this? Much different response, right? So when you become an emotional crisis responder, what happens is you don't become part of the crisis. You don't become part of the crisis. That's huge. And I know that there are people in schools, I'm sure there are none that are here, who always are part of the crisis. And you're like, "Oh my gosh, why did it have to happen in that teacher's class? We're never going to make progress." Okay, do not become part of the crisis. So, my kids can have an emotion, right? They can get really, really angry. I grew up in a house where when you were angry, you were to be seen and not heard. It's a big blueprint for me. And you don't cry. That was my blueprint growing up. So when I had kids, I really got to think that through a little bit different. Because I know that that's not a healthy blueprint. It's really not a good plan. Because really, I need those kids of mine, the people I work with, the people I love and I live with, I need them to have emotion with me, a safe adult. I need that to happen before they go out in the world. Because if they don't learn how to have that with me and be in a crisis with me, when are they going to learn that? Who is going to hold that space with them? So emotional crisis responder. You are there to de-escalate the situation, not escalate. Now, I had an incident. This is very personal, and I'm a little bit hesitant to tell you because we're recording, but it's really, really good story. So there I was, working in a public school setting on my CSCT team, school-based mental health. Got myself a great behavioral specialist, and we're doing our therapist, and we're working with a kid who is 7, and he can trash a room in 10 seconds. Computers on the floor, desks on the floor, we get called. Typically the response is a restraint. This is before I do what I do. Restrain the kid, he de-escalates, we hold him there, then we move on. Anybody ever had that situation? Okay. That's how we used to do things, right? So in that moment, we got up from the restraint. Kid and I were kind of processing. He looks at me and he grabs my wrist and he gives me the biggest titty twister I've ever had in my entire life. I have never come close to hitting a kid, ever. And I grabbed his little hands and I was like, don't you ever do that again. And I left and I was like, I need a break. I could not see that kid for another, like, I couldn't see, I was hot. Like he, right? Closest I've ever come. When people violate you, you struggle. I struggle. I called the mom and I was like, here's the deal. Your kid gave me a titty twister. I probably left bruises on his wrists. I didn't, it was lucky it wasn't my partner. She would have smacked him. Because I'm a flighter. My natural instinct is flight. So I flew. She's a fighter. So it was good he got me. Neither one of us are freezers. That would have been very awful. So I called the mom. I was like, I just need some time. I'll call you back, but I want to let you know what happened. Didn't go well. The mom, we'd worked, we'd had a lot of relationship, we talked it through. I was not a good crisis responder in that moment. There are times that we get triggered, right? If you don't get triggered from a titty twister, more power to you, okay? But like for real, there are times you're gonna get punched, you're gonna get hit, you're gonna get kicked, you're gonna get spit on, like things are gonna happen, and it stinks, like it's awful and it doesn't feel good, and you really don't wanna see that kid ever again in that moment. Like they're hard kids to be with, right? So keeping in mind that the goal is to de-escalate, remove yourself, tag, someone else is it. Someone else gets to come in and be that crisis responder. Because if you're part of the crisis, you can't necessarily be the responder. And that's okay, we're human, right? After you've had that incident with the kid, you have to go back and repair that relationship. You, as the adult, have to go back and engage with that kid. And maybe that engagement is around, when you, fill in the blank, for me, gave me a titty twister, I did not feel safe. That really scared me. I'm sorry that that incident happened between us, and I want things to be better. Right? And I don't always know what better means, but I know that I have to give that kid another chance. If I can give that kid another chance, I can't do this work anymore. And there are kids you don't want to give another chance to. They drive you crazy, right? So I have a no-kill policy. You can't kill them, they can't kill you, no one can kill themselves. Because you get to a point where you kind of want to kill everybody and they want to kill you. Like that's what happens. When relationships are messy and ugly and they're not clean. Right? Especially when you're safe. When you're in a safe relationship, things get messy. But you want to be the crisis responder. Make sense? Great analogy, right? All right. Focusing on safety. If a kid does not feel safe, you can't make progress. Safety is physical safety. Safety is emotional safety. There's lots of pieces of safety. Right? I had a kid who was in high school and the teacher that he had a problem with, it took us like 6 months to figure this out, wore the same perfume as his biological mom. We had no idea, and it wasn't a perfume she wore consistently. That was his trigger. Right? So the trigger is really around, just like in the movie, that dress was the trigger, right? We don't even know what our triggers are sometimes. And if you have kids who've had pre-verbal trauma, so before the age of 3, which a lot of kids have, they can't verbalize what the trauma is. But think about this for a minute. This is pretty complex, okay? But I trust we got this. You guys are good. If I feel sad today, that same feeling of sadness is the same sort of sad that I felt when I was 4 or 5. Sad is sad. Might be for different reasons, but it's the same feeling. If I feel scared, same feeling that I had when I was 2 or 3. Okay, so I had this kiddo who came into my life, foster care, had been in the system for a long time, was with really awesome foster parents. They fostered for years and years, lots of experience, okay? And he was part of this big system that lots of terrible, horrible things had happened to him. Okay, when he came to me, he was 10, wasn't sleeping through the night, horrible nightmares, waking up every 2 to 3 hours, still wetting his pants, and couldn't go to school for more than 1 or 2 hours a day. Developmentally, where's this kid?
6 months.
6 months or younger, right? We're talking little guy in a 10-year-old body, okay? So we got to know each other, did a lot of relationship building, felt safe, always met with the kid with his parents in the room, did some EMDR. How many of you are familiar with that? Okay, so EMDR is a therapeutic tool, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. We use it for a lot of trauma-related issues. So did some EMDR with this kid. What happened is you kind of float back and you kind of revisit the trauma that occurred. Well, in a lot of kids who are pre-verbal, they don't have a cognitive memory of what happened, but they can feel the feeling. So anytime they feel scared, they think that the trauma is happening to them again, or is going to happen again, right? So he did this activity with me, he did EMDR with me, and he was able to recall feeling scared as an infant when he was placed in the trunk of a car while his parents didn't know. So, that alone in and of itself is pretty terrible, right? Well, the really scary part for him, and we just focused on feeling scared versus feeling safe. His safe place was on a swing set. That's where he felt the safest, was on the swing set. Scared, not only was he being placed in the trunk of a car while his parents had met, he had scars on his hand from when rats had eaten him. Why wasn't he sleeping through the night? Scared of the dark, scared something was going to get him, scared, right? Anytime that he had to go to the bathroom at school, he had to go into a dark bathroom and the light flicked on. It was an auto light. The light was never on before he got in there. So he would get in there and he'd go to pee his pants because he was so scared. He had no words for that. There are no words for how you feel, that terror and that heavy, heavy scared piece. So creating safety was really around his relationships, around not putting him in the dark. Once he worked through that though, once we kind of got the EMDR pieces where you connect the whole experience, you connect the emotion and you connect the body sensation and you connect the thought process, and we were able to get him to a point where he could sleep through the night and he stopped wetting his pants. That's progress, right? Huge progress. So the other thing that's happening is he would get scared at school and he would run and he'd leave the school. Every time he left the school, the police were called. So how did he start feeling about police? That was a whole other set we had to do, right? He wasn't leaving because he was being defiant. He was leaving because he was scared that something bad was going to happen to him. So it's important to really think through safety. What do you have to do to create safety? IEP meeting may or may not be safe. How is the parent feeling safe? We had a nice conversation at break about sometimes these parents that we have in our lives have never had any of these skills. They don't know what their kid needs. They don't know where they're at developmentally. They might not be able to do some of the things. They have probably experienced trauma themselves, right? Trauma can be generational. So really important to think through that when you have that interaction with that parent, it's one more step towards creating a healthy relationship. So I often tell beginning therapists who are like, oh my gosh, what do I do when I close the door? That's so intimidating. They've left me with this person, what do I do? If you do nothing else, create a positive relationship. Because that in and of itself is healthy, right? I have a colleague I work with, she says if you're not contributing to health, you're contributing to pathology. So safety is a big, big piece. Okay, building trust in a relationship. How do you build trust with someone?
Be honest.
Honest, keep your promises.
Be consistent.
Being consistent.
Listening to them.
Listening.
Creating boundaries.
creating boundaries. Now, let's talk about boundaries for half a second. Some people don't like boundaries. If you live in a world where you've had no boundaries your whole life and you start creating boundaries, what? What do you mean I can't do what I want? It gets kind of weird, right? But there's safety in that, definitely, and there's trust and relationship in that. But just keep in mind, some of that pushback you get is because this is an unknown concept, right? The only way I know how to build trust in relationship is through time. That's it. If I don't take the time to learn about you, you can't trust me. There's no shortcut to that, right? So when people want me to fix their kid, and I say you need to spend time with them, what? I don't have time to spend. I can't believe the number of people that I see who don't spend at least 5 minutes of quality time with their children. 5 a day. 5 a day. That's all I'm asking. 5. What happens in schools, right, is we get so busy having to do so many things that we forget that time is important. So I had a great colleague, and he said one day, he's like, I don't think we should do any education the first 2 weeks of school. I think all we should do is build relationships and talk about how we're going to help the school environment function moving forward. What a great idea! And he got a lot of pushback from that. We don't have time for that. We have 2 weeks. We gotta get in. We gotta do our education. We gotta do this. We gotta do that. But think of the time, if you took the time to build relationships with kids and you played and you, at all ages, because play doesn't just apply to little kids, but you played and you did like group building activities and team building and trust building and all these things in the first couple weeks of school, how would that shift your year? More learning would happen. Because now you have kids in a safe environment, right? Think about high school. How many kids come into school and they don't know any other kids? Or they don't have friends in some of their classes. And there's all sorts of anxiety around that.
I suspect that would reduce some bully behavior that you see too.
Absolutely.
I was just spent 3 days with somebody and he said, I don't think we have a bully problem, we have a relationship with a respect problem.
Yeah. Right, because bullying is really around not understanding other people, right? So it's about building relationships and caring for kids, okay? So my kids go to a school in Colorado where they have a school counselor 1 day a week. I get a little twitchy about that. Because like my kids just went through a big death, like their grandmother died over the holidays. I would love for them to be able to like chat about that in the middle of their day if they needed to, right? They can call me, absolutely, but it'd be nice for them to have an outside perspective, you know? So we use school counselors a lot. Sometimes we don't use them enough. Sometimes we're not using them the right way, right? Because sometimes it's all about the crisis, when really it could be around the relationship and the time. So just think about that. As you're going back and you're putting some of these things in place, the best way to overcome trauma is through relationship and connection. It takes time and it takes safety. The other thing is, how many of you have kids who you can't trust? I'm going to challenge you a little bit. Because if you can't trust them, I don't know if they can trust you. Because this trust is one way. This baby has to trust that I am going to meet her needs. Until she trusts me, I can't trust her. Does that make sense? So really important that if you don't trust a kid, you need to work on them trusting you first. All right, somatosensory breaks. We spent some time on that. I do have to tell you one somatosensory story, okay? All right. So there I was in my office, got a phone call from 2 educators who were really on top of it, and they were taking in a kid, and they're like, Stacy, we have a major emergency. We have a 5-year-old kid, not their biological child, kinship placement, and this kid is being kicked out of school every day. I was like, 5-year-old suspension. Yes. Let's do this. So I said, what's going on? And they said, well, he goes into school and every single day he takes the desk apart. He is physically turning all of the screws and it is falling apart. And they have had 3 or 4 janitors come in and like drill it back together, and this kid manages to get every single screw out of the desk. So they've eliminated it. They're like, you're out. You keep taking the desk apart. So let's think about that. I'm a kid. I know I've had trauma. What am I doing? Pattern repetitive behavior, right? And I'm going to do this for as long as I'm anxious. And I can work that in a way that you will never ever be able to have the strong enough tools to get, because I'm good. I'm really good. And I will make it fall apart all the time, right? So what we ended up doing is we took multiple pieces of cloth of all varying, like we had sandpaper and we had tulle and we had fleece and we had velvet, and we put it all over his desk. And it stopped, and the behavior stopped. He stopped taking the desk because he was rubbing. Right? It created all sorts of other behaviors. So, another story for another time. But he was managed, he did not disrupt the class. Now he was just a disruption to himself. It wasn't the whole entire class. We moved forward. I gave him Bruce Perry's book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, for the parents to read, and they came back the next week and they're like, well, we left it on the table and he got a hold of it and he read the first chapter. Because he was a 5-year-old with a super big IQ. And so he was talking about, oh, I guess I have sensory problems and this is what I'm going to need to address. And so you have to be aware of those things. All right, time in versus timeout. How many of you guys use timeouts? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So timeout really should be for adults to take a timeout, okay? Because a timeout, you are sending a message that a kid has enough skill to go and get them self-regulated.
And it cannot generalize.
Nope. So what do you mean by that?
They can't take the behavior they just had and go into a timeout and use all this executive function to figure out how they're going to be better next time.
Right. So if I'm an infant and I'm crying, do I say, go to your room and figure it out? Do I? What do I do? Right? I help regulate them. I help regulate them. Now, there are moments when you have an infant who's crying and you can't handle it anymore. And you have to be like, I'll be back. Mom, I need some help. Spouse, I need some help. Right? That's about a timeout. Timeout and time in. So time in is about you are helping that kid regulate. You're moving them closer to you, you're spending time with them, you're talking to them about what's going on, you're staying regulated. Your crisis, their crisis is not your crisis. You are the crisis responder. Time in is about bringing them in and saying, I need to take care of you, I need to help you because you cannot help yourself, you're out of control. A student has to be regulated externally before they can be regulated internally. You're not just born with self-regulation. Someone teaches you how to regulate yourself. Okay? And then once you know that, you can do that. So my daughter has a bunch of ADD stuff. She's a pretty funny kid. And so she had a first-year teacher, and she walks in, and she's like, her deal is she takes too much in. She was coming home, and she's like, Miss Brianna had the cutest shirt on today. It had the orange hem. And I'm like, hem? Who looks at the color of a hem? Oh dear, she's taking in everything. Well, we taught her about the words overwhelmed. And when she feels overwhelmed, she has to have a break. So she said to her first year teacher, hey, Miss Houston, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Miss Houston was like, she's like, can I please go sit in the hallway for a few minutes and have a break? Love that she knew to do that, but not a typical kindergarten response, right? Not typical at all. So what happened in that though is she could take a timeout because she was able to regulate herself. She could do that on her own. But a lot of the kids that we have that we send to the hall or we send to timeout, like what happens in the hallway? They're disrupting everybody else and all of the classes that walk by. True? Yeah. Okay? Or if they're in high school and you send them out, they're ditching, they're out. They're not even gonna come back to school that day. They don't want to do it. So really be thinking about that. How can you help kids regulate? That's why I loved the chill out couch, because it was in someone's presence. It means they were in a safe environment. Building in positive touch. Now this is something that we need to take a deep breath, because we're educators and we have lots of stuff around touch, right? We're not supposed to touch kids, we're not supposed to hug kids, we're not supposed to have any of that interaction. True or false? Okay? Touch is one of the most powerful tools in our toolbox if it's used in the right way. Now, we will touch kids when they're out of control and we restrain them. Right? And that's pretty intrusive and can trigger all sorts of stuff. So I always encourage people to figure out a way to have touch. It can be a high five, it can be an elbow five. I had a teacher that did that with every kid that came in. They stood at the door and they said, "Good morning, how are you?" Elbow, 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 elbow. Mostly this teacher was a germaphobe and didn't want to touch anyone's hands. True? But it worked, and they totally did that. And then if they didn't get that elbow, like, they knew something was up. So creating safe ways for that to happen, right? 1 second parties, that's all about, we sometimes do 1 second high fives. Okay? We talked about sensory stuff. These are just things to kind of think about. Lots of times, if you can provide visual stuff for kids of all ages, when they're in a crisis, they can visually look at something and they can process it that way. Another tool I've used for kids who have a lot of anger, Altoids. Altoids, you say? Give them an Altoid. You cannot really be that angry and eat an Altoid. I dare you. Because what it is it's a sensory experience in your mouth. Anger is a sensory experience. When you tag an Altoid in there, it kind of minimizes everything. Right? It works. If it doesn't work, you call me. That means they've got taste issues, which could be part of it, right? Smells, senses. You can do a lot of intervention based on sensory stuff. I think I heard somebody over here about essential oil stuff.
I use essential oils all day long.
Yeah.
And I bet I have 50, 60 kids come in per day. They have a headache oil. They know all the oils, but they know where the bag's at, and they use it.
Yeah. What does that tell you?
But I spend a lot of money on oils.
This girl is raised. Think of that whole experience that you're giving those kids, right? Like, kids, if you really listen and observe what's going on in kids, they will tell you what they need. And they obviously need either the oil or the experience with you. That's the other piece of it, because it usually happens in a relationship, right? Like, generally speaking, they're not probably just coming in and getting an oil. They probably have to ask permission.
The thought would help. I mean, even if whether it's in their mind or it actually it's just that thought of somebody taking care of them.
Right.
Even if it's 2 seconds.
Right, absolutely. And some kids don't ever get that. Some kids don't have somebody taking care of them. And how good does that feel? What age do you see?
I have 9 through 12.
9 through 12. Even 9 through 12 need someone taking care of them.
Yeah.
Almost need it more. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so just think about sensory interventions.
Well, like you said about the perfume that triggered that kid, research now shows that our first experience is smell.
Yep.
So in rehab, especially neuro rehab, with people in comas and brain injuries, we use essential oils or smells first to help them get back to function.
Yeah, and I have a kid who has no smell. So she has a lot of hygiene issues because she has no smell. She's 16, and that's a big peer situation for her. So, just more food for thought. Music, I don't think we use music enough, to be honest. I think that we kind of set things up in the classroom that we don't really use a lot of music, and we don't really let kids have music, and some kids don't like the music we like, and we don't like the music they like. But when you sit with a kid, I used to do this with every teenager that came in. Within the first 3 sessions I met with them, they had to bring me 3 or 4 of their favorite songs. And we listened to them, and then they told me why they liked them. Now, listening to the same Slipknot song, a little intense, right? Eminem's always a favorite. You know, so those are ways to kind of connect with kids, build trust and relationship. But when you hear why they chose the song they chose, they're telling you a piece of their story. And most of the kids choose a really intense song. These aren't like, they're just happy-go-lucky songs. They're deep and intense. So, all right. Any questions about that? Okay. Empathy, empathy, empathy. I'm a little bit big on empathy. If you don't know how to do empathy, repeat what you hear. Not what you think you heard, not what you think they might feel. Repeat what you heard. Giving empathy is a big piece. The other thing is, it is okay sometimes, if you have a really good relationship with a kid and you know you have a good relationship, it's okay to make some guesses. Like, excuse me, like, wow, if I'd gone through that, I might feel confused. I might feel sad. Because sometimes they've never had someone help them label what they feel, right? And I don't care what age they are. I have adults who sit in my office who can't express feelings. I had a dad and a daughter in my office last week, and the daughter got all teary, she's 12, all teary. And I was like, hey, what are your tears about? Dad pulls out his phone and starts playing solitaire.
Oh my gosh.
And it was awesome, actually. The whole thing was awesome. The daughter's like, I can't tell you how I feel because my dad's busy playing solitaire. He doesn't even care. And I was like, Dad, she called you out. Like, she's having emotion. She needs you to be here and be present. Like, to help her through that. When you play solitaire, he got really uncomfortable because he doesn't do emotion, right? So helping them label how they feel can be helpful as well. Forgiveness. As much as I didn't want to forgive the titty twister kid, I had to. I had to, right? And they gotta happen or I wouldn't have that story to tell you. So, I mean, especially if you work in like residential treatment centers or you work in really intensive places, you're gonna get a lot of behavior that you have to forgive. It's tough. Recognize that misbehaviors are symptoms. So this is a big piece, right? Misbehavior is a language. It is a language of a child trying to tell you what they need. And our job is to see what's happening under that. What is happening underneath that behavior? Sometimes we miss the boat completely with that. Be proactive. One of the things we talked a lot about is this whole proactive versus reactive thing, right? If we are dealing with a crisis in the crisis, we're not going to be as effective as if we're really thinking through what's going on. So, now I want you to turn over your page. So we've gone through a lot. We've still got a few more things to go through. I want you to think about this kid that you labeled on the front page, the kid name you have. I want you to really think about their developmental age. Where are they at developmentally when they're calm? And where are they at developmentally when they're stressed? I can tell you today that I am developmentally when I'm stressed usually about a 2 or 3-year-old. I'm gonna say some probably 3 or 4. I'm gonna say some mean, hurtful words. I'm probably gonna stop my foot. I might cry a little bit. Okay? Where are they at though? Okay? And then I want you to think about what do you do to create safety in your environment? And then what can you do to build trust with the kiddo and with their caregiver? Because this is multi-layered. All right, go. All right, do you guys have some time? Okay. Has it been helpful to kind of fill this out as you go through the day, kind of think and shift and change? And I want to hear a little bit from you guys. What did you come up with for creating safety? What can you do to create safety in your environment? Listen to the child, okay?
You could be the responder, you could stay calm, respond.
Staying calm. Yeah, it's big.
For us,
Hard, but good.
we have a really hard time just giving our kids the time and space to de-escalate. We want to jump in and talk to them or touch them way before they're ready. And then we get hurt, and it just becomes a cycle. And I can't convince people that you need to just leave them alone for 10 minutes.
Right, right. So I think that's a really great point, because I think sometimes we want a kid to de-escalate on our terms, right? In our timeline, like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I got lunch, I got this, we got things we gotta get done, I got a whole class to deal with, blah, blah, blah. And so it could take hours for some kids to de-escalate. And what happens in that is when you give them the space and the respect to let them do that in their own time, you're building trust and relationship and creating safety. And over time, the more you do that, the smaller that space has and that time is, right? So, good point, very good point.
Or their parents get called, which is where the trigger may have come from.
Right.
So you're putting them into an environment that's possibly unsafe. You
Yeah.
don't know that, but I mean, they get removed immediately. They're not even given, I guess, or somebody else is talking. What happened? Why am I getting called again?
Absolutely. Yep.
Pay attention to the child and the behavior so that you can try to identify the trigger and if need be remove the child from the trigger, remove the trigger from that.
Right,
You know,
so.
like you said, give that kid that space and that time and that respect. You'd be amazed at what they'll tell you. It's kind of what my room is for. The teachers have a problem, they'll usually give them that minute to send them to me.
Yeah.
And they will come in and they'll sit down, and it's on their terms. They bring their homework in, they just work quiet until they're ready.
Yeah.
You know, you give them that space, and they're normally going to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, you may not get into the in-depth, but you can get through the day, and then, you know, Christine will get to the in-depth. I mean, you know, you gotta work as a team, though, and you're not going to have that figured out.
Absolutely. And there are definitely some people that this kid may or may not want to talk to, right? And
Exactly.
exposing them before the trigger is up is not a good plan, or before they're calm enough to deal with that. And definitely tuning in and recognizing what could be the trigger. So sometimes triggers can be obvious, but sometimes we have no idea. And sometimes it may take time, right? How many of us have gotten kids from other schools and they have a big old file and they've got a history as long as can be? They may actually do okay if you don't put all that stuff on them to begin with, right? So I kind of have this thing in my practice, I don't read anything about a kid until I've met them. Period. People will send me reports, they'll bring in everything, that's all fine and good, but I don't read it until I've actually met the kid. Because I want to form my own opinion and my own relationship based on my stuff and my connection, right? Okay? What are you guys doing? What can you do to build trust and relationship?
Follow through with what you tell them you're going to do, not just one, make threats and never do it, or you promise them you're going to do something. You
Yep.
better do that.
Yep. So follow
Communicate
through,
with them.
communicate.
Communication is huge.
Yep.
They want to feel a part of it.
Are we talking about the kid or the parent?
Both. Communication
Yeah.
is huge.
Absolutely.
I found by kind of making myself a little bit vulnerable, telling them, look, this is what I've been through, this is what I've had to deal with. Gives them a chance to say, okay, maybe she hasn't been the exact same thing, but she has been there, they've been working up the talk, and somebody knows a little bit, you know, I've been through something.
Yeah, so I think you bring up something that's really important, because there are pieces that we don't always share our experience with people, right? Whenever you see me speak, you will always hear me talk about my life and my story and pieces of it for that exact reason. Because I'm human. I have not gone through this life without scars and wounds, right? And I do that in the work that I do with families. My story isn't always the same as theirs, but I share a piece of my journey with them because that's me being vulnerable with them, and hopefully they can give back. Now there's levels of that, right? It's important to have boundaries. It's important not to make it my own therapy session. As much as I need that sometimes, I go to my own therapist. Okay? So it's important to have those boundaries, but it's okay to be human too. So good point, okay? Somebody said consistency, right? That whole greetings, how are you today versus hey, what's up? And kids know when you're having a bad day. Kids know when you're struggling. And I also think it's okay to tell kids, like, you know, hey, I'm kind of having a tough day today. I could use your help.
Yeah.
Like, help me out.
Share emotion in a healthy way so that both the parent and the child can understand that there are healthy ways and not everyone is experiencing stress.
Yep. Absolutely. Sharing emotion in a healthy way. That can be very good. Okay? Any other things?
Always letting them know that what they're saying is important to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Letting them know it's important. Really, you should be listening more than you should be talking.
Right.
Until you get to a place where you have enough relationship that you can be talking. Right? That's very important. Okay? Did any of you guys move on to the next piece about specific strategies you think you might try out? We kind of peppered them in today, right? We didn't get to a lot of specifics because I really want you to have a broad range of why you do what you do, because that's going to be more helpful for you. If you know you have a kid with sensory issues, you have to address brainstem stuff. You have to address physiology piece. You have to consult with your OT. You have to get some help around what that looks like. If you have a kid with self-regulation issues, you can't ask them how they feel. They may not know how they feel. They may not have a word for how they feel, right? You're going to get to a better place if you know what part of the brain is going on. Always, every intervention has to have what involved? Relationship. Relationship, relationship. This doesn't work if you don't put in the time. And these problems aren't fixed overnight. Absolutely not fixed overnight. It takes time. When you think about 90% of the brain is organized by age 3, and you're getting kids at elementary school, middle school, high school, adulthood, we have a lot of rewiring to do. I had this brilliant parent. She was awesome. She was very confident. And she had a really tough kid who would melt down in Walmart all the time. Then we were like, don't take him to Walmart. But that's not always realistic, right? I agree though. It's like obvious, right? But so what she did is she had business cards made up, and there was like a little piece of information about trauma on the front, and on the back it said, please excuse me, we're rewiring my child's brain. And anytime she'd get the look, like at Walmart or other public places, she gave the business card out. And then she'd have like a website. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Because she was really like, it's my job as a parent to meet my kid where they're at. And sometimes kids have to throw temper tantrums, and I didn't get to choose where they get to throw them. I wish I did. But we don't get to choose where those emotions happen. And so she was really around educating, like meeting her kid in that need. And you know, you get all sorts of judgment when that happens. And she was like, hey, you know, I'm meeting my kid and I'm rewiring their brain. So be supportive of that.
Yeah, but I knelt down at Walmart.
We all melt down. Well, that's what we were talking about. I was like, I don't even go to Walmart, to be honest, anymore. My husband goes because I don't love it. So
I used to work at Walmart. I
Right.
really don't like it.
Right. Okay. So this whole understand anger versus fear. Remember my intense guy, right? Was he angry or was he scared?
Scared.
Angry people, kind of hard to deal with. Scared people, a lot more understanding happens. Most people with anger problems have scared problems. So when you can meet that need of, and you can use the words, you're safe here. You're safe with me. This is safe. We can move forward because we're safe. You're gonna get a lot further, make a lot more progress with your kiddo. Be proactive. Always a better plan to have a plan. I had this fabulous science teacher. Prior planning prevents poor performance, right? Anytime we fail our chemistry test, you put 5 Ps and give it back to you. Oh, it stuck with me, right? So prior planning prevents poor performance. If you have a kid you're struggling with, do some prior planning. That's what hopefully you're doing today, is you're thinking through some strategies that might be effective for your kid. Now you're gonna leave here and you're gonna go try them out, and some of them are gonna fail and you're gonna be mad at me. And I'm okay with that. You have my email address. If you don't, you should write it down, and I have cards up here. You can email me and say that didn't work. But it might not work because it might have been one attempt. And it might actually be what the kid needs, but you need thousands of attempts before it really does work. Right? But if you plan and you're proactive and you're not reactive, you're going to get in a further place because you're not in crisis yourself. You are the paramedic. Treatment teams. We don't speak enough about this. Lean on each other. How many of you go to an IEP meeting, you spend 2 or 3 hours at that meeting, then you don't talk about the kid for the next time, until the next IEP? Right? You all got this detailed plan, but then there's no talk about it. Sometimes just taking 5 or 10 minutes every day to touch base about what you're doing can really help move things along. The other thing is utilize your team outside of school. I guarantee these kids have people outside of school. Most of them have people outside of school. Use them, contact them, reach out to them. So an issue around confidentiality came up earlier, right? Find the people who will give you your information that you need to work with the kid. So one of the things that I do with all the kids I work with, A, I don't meet with the kid without the parent there, generally. There's some exceptions to that. And B, I always contact the teacher that of the kid I'm working with. And I let people know, like, if you want me in your life, I'm here to help, but I have to have everybody involved. I want everybody on the same page. And there might be bits and pieces that I do share or I don't share, but I'm gonna ask the teacher, like, what do you need to know to help this kid? What can we help you out with? Right? Because sometimes you don't get that information. True or false? And sometimes you may not know. There's a lot of people and a lot of kids who come to my life, I don't know their story. They don't know their early childhood story. So we have to make some guesses about that. The bottom line though, I need to create safety and I need to build relationship, period. No matter what the story is. Have fun. How many of you have fun with the kids who drive you crazy? Does that help your relationship? Yes. I would rather be with people who are fun than people who are crabby. Right? So sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. All they ever do is play games. There's a method to my madness. I am playing games because that is fun for them and fun for me. It's a positive interaction, positive relational interaction, and kids talk while they're having fun. I've heard more really terrible, horrible stories that needed to be shared in the context of fun than ever. Because they are going to talk to you when they feel safe and comfortable. What is the language of all children? Play. Play. My kids wake up in the morning, first thing, like, Mom, I got a Hot Wheels. Mom, we're driving in the car. Mom, blah, 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 blah. You know, like it's play all day long. It's play. And some of the kids we have never played like that. They don't know how to play. If you teach them how to play, you're giving them a lifelong skill. How many of you don't play very often? Right? So a big piece of all of the stuff we're talking about is how do you take care of yourself in this? There's lots of levels of taking care of yourself. One is recognizing when you can't work with a kid. There are some kids it's not, you can't work with them. And that's okay. Call it. Because it's better to call it and say, I can't do this, than it is to give them another negative relationship interaction. Right? How many of you take your work home with you at night? You're all fired. So that's something to be very thoughtful about because now your work is becoming your life. So set some boundaries around that. Now I understand you all are overworked and underpaid. Like I know that, right? You got lots of things you have to get done, but set some boundaries around that. Anytime I work on a Saturday, I try to take off half a day Monday. That didn't happen this week. Right? Wouldn't that be nice? I work for myself. I don't play well with others. So. But it's important to take care of yourself. Have fun. What do you do for hobbies? Who do you talk to? Now, I'm a big believer. How many of you do your taxes in here? Okay. It's more important to have a therapist than do your taxes. I'm just saying. If I said to you, you're going to get fined because you don't have a therapist or you don't have a mental health person in your life, you would get a mental health therapist. But you are getting fined every time you don't take care of yourself emotionally. You're robbing yourself from your relationships in your own personal life, and you're robbing yourself from your own life. Because you get sick and you get tired, and so take care of you, right? So right now, I want you to write down 3 things that you do for fun. Under here, we have support webs, okay? This is you. Who is your support system? Who do you lean on? And then I want you to write 3 things you do for fun. 3 minutes to spare. Right. Gotta wrap it up. It's okay if you don't have all those blanks filled in, that's okay. But I want you to have at least one person in there. And you need to have at least one thing you do for fun. So support webs is another tool that I use when I think about a kid and a family, because many of the kids in my life don't have a lot of support systems. And what happens is typically their support systems are professionals or paid people, teachers, educators, administrators, therapists, case workers. My goal, kind of the way I know these kids are ready to get out of my life, is when those support systems are natural support systems. When they have shifted and they have become their family, their friends, their faith center, whatever that looks like. So that's another way of thinking about your family. The more supports we have in place, the healthier we are, right? So I have friends that I talk about my husband with. I have friends that I talk about my kids with. I have friends that I talk about my mom with, right? It's important to have diverse people. And that's not always the same person. All right, so there's 229 heart rate monitors right here. You are getting some handouts. Miss Erin's going to talk to you about what you're getting in just a moment. I have had a wonderful time here today. I really appreciate you taking a Saturday to hang out and spend with me. That's a big commitment. I also appreciate you sitting still and paying attention for as long as you did without a sensory break. And I recognize that that's not always healthy. I had a great time with you. I am in your life. This is my contact information. If you need me as a resource, let's talk about it and brainstorm and what the best ways that could be. It could be to run some ideas by, could be me coming to your community. It could be that we didn't even get to talk today and you had some questions for me, so you can email or call me. If you call me, leave a message. I don't ever answer because I'm in session, and I will always call you back, always. If I don't call you back, it means I didn't get your message. It really does mean that, okay? If you have not given me your email and you'd like me to have your email, please come and fill that out. My website is bewhatsright.com. So RIGHT stands for role model with integrity, genuineness, honesty, and trust. Because I think that's really the core of our relationships, right? So, I didn't leave much time for question and answers. I'm so sorry.
Do you want to explain that?
Yes, so I'm done. Thank you. I'm turning it over to you guys.